You're listening to And the Plot Thickens, an Authors on the Air Radio Network podcast. Join your host, suspense and horror writer Jeff Crawford, as he explores the art of creating tension and mood with authors from a wide variety of genres. Find out more about Jeff and his books at authorjeffcrawford.com. And now, meet today's author guest.
Hey up and welcome to And the Plot Thickens, part of the Authors on the Air Global Radio Network. I'm your host, Jeff Crawford, and my producer is Carrie Schaefer. Today's guest is from the UK, but now lives in Greece. He's a prolific writer with many titles to his credit, and is someone that I've come to respect and admire greatly. Andrew Weston, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Jeff. I've been looking forward very much to being on the show, and I'm glad to be here.
It's a treat. It is a treat. I don't deal with a lot of beating around the bush. We just jump into this. And as you know, we talk mainly about suspense and the creation of it here. So I got to thinking about that, and I never had talked about this with a guest, but about the definition of suspense. And it's almost like horror. You know, everybody's got a little bit of a different take on it.
Yeah.
To me, suspense is what goes through your mind when you take the last step off of a stairwell in the dark and thinking there's one more, but there's not. But in your very eloquent and insightful way, tell us the meaning of suspense to you and how you achieve the desired level of it for the reader in your books.
Suspense, I think, well, one aspect of it is creating, I would say, tension or anxiety in your reader. It's connecting with them and getting them to react to whatever scenario you've put down in writing. Now, when you're a speculative writer, or a speculative fiction writer, people tend to think, oh, that's easy to do. Well, in fact, it's not, because speculative fiction, okay, it covers all genres, but you're incorporating aspects, say, of the supernatural or the futuristic or the imaginary or the magic. And there's a danger there that you could lose your reader, because you've got to keep certain elements real, haven't you? You've got to create that, as it were, that mental picture. You've got to create that appropriate image in their mind that they can connect to. So by keeping certain elements real, it helps your reader appreciate why it is that they need to be scared, or there's that tension there, or that anxiety. And you can weave it in all sorts of ways. For example, again, keeping it in context, you can create tension or conflict between a protagonist and an antagonist. Give them different goals, opposing goals, opposing aspirations. You can do it within the context of where they are. Is it in a jungle? Is it at night? Is it in a burnt out factory? All things like that. There's danger from the environment itself, danger from what they might come across, or who they might come across, and that you can create tension when there's an eventual standoff. There's all sorts of ways that you can do it, but I think an important aspect about creating tension, creating that anxiety, is you've got to let it ebb and flow. If you keep it on one level for too long, it can exhaust the reader. So, like, give it an ebb and flow, give it a little trigger point here and there, and sometimes let them down. Something that Neil Gaiman's really good at doing that. I'm an avid fan of Neil Gaiman, and the way his attention to detail and people's emotions are build, and it's kind of like, swine, I think there's other times, bam, it'll knock your socks off. So you've got to do that and think of ways that so you can really mix it up, and elicit that emotion in a way that you can. That appeals to the reader.
Right. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. It's reading when it comes to suspense and tension, edginess is a roller coaster, and it can't all be downhill, taking your breath away. You've got to have a moment to where you're building, but you're also catching your breath.
Yes.
So you've got to be able to do both.
Yeah.
and I agree completely.
Mm.
Um, okay, so you're doing all this. Do you have a go-to tool in your kit that you consider your most reliable, or for when setting up a book that's to be filled with all this edginess and nerve-rattling moments? Some writers use their characters to do all the heavy lifting. Some use the environment within the book. Some use histories inside the book. Some, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm.
Do you have a thing that you rely on the most?
Well, yeah, but again, it depends on the story I'm telling. One of the best ways I found of creating a connection with uh, the reader is, for example, the Cambion journals with Raven Tail. What I've done there, I've mixed point of view. I've mixed it. I researched it quite a lot before I even dared to try it, because most people go with either third pav or first. And so I thought, okay, so one way to really, because like sometimes that third point of view, it allows you to allows the reader to find out what's going on elsewhere and who's doing what. You know, your main characters, your sub characters, who nevertheless are going to be playing important parts. But what I did with the Cambion journals, Augustus Thorne is the main protagonist. I put him in first pav, first point of view. So, and that way I found it really creates a connection, because instead of saying he did this, he did that, he went blah blah, I did, I went there. And as they're reading it, they're forming that I, not
Hmm.
Augustus on I. They're connecting with the way he feels, the anger, the hatred, the, is going to get them. So one of the ways I do is I mixed POV. And I found it works very well. I tried it out in a couple of books now, and it works superbly. And it is a superb way of creating tension.
Great, great. I was talking with Doug Lyle a few weeks ago, and he's big on mixing uh, how it's written in a book, whether it's
Yeah,
first person, third. He'll break it up so much that the protagonist or the antagonist one will be a first
mm,
person, and
yeah,
everything else will be
in
third
third.
person, and he
Yeah,
flips back and forth during the
yeah,
book, and that's a great tool
it is.
if you're careful. You have to be careful
Yes.
and not, or it can get
Yes.
away from you.
Never in the same scene. Sometimes it's just one scene in first person when it goes to Augustus on, and sometimes it's an entire chapter from his point of view, because it allows you, to experience what he's experiencing. But then by reverting to third party, then what's going on elsewhere and what they're planning for him, things that he doesn't know about. Things that are going to come up as a surprise him, and so yes, but it has to be done properly. Otherwise, it just doesn't make
Right.
sense. Yeah.
Right. Um, while we're on this, let's see. I'm going to save that one a second. I
Okay.
know you to not only be a writer of some dark and some edgy business, but you're also a fan of reading books that have that.
Yeah. Mm.
Why? What is the appeal of all that for
Oh,
writing and reading it?
I think I've always had a vivid imagination. Always have. I could read before I went to school. My mum and dad encouraged me to do that, and it started with comic books. And of course, the comic books, the first ones has it's mainly the picture with a few words underneath and so on. But getting in there, I'd lose myself. So, we had certain comic books in Britain that they told adventures of boys in outer space, of one General Jumbo, his name was called. He was a young lad, but he was a technical genius, as was his dad. He used to have and he used to have a little armband that could control hand-built robots, and he used to fight wars with them, and he'd fight crime with them. So things like this, it was awesome. And of course, growing up in the 90s, I was born in 1960. Excuse me, I'm just being attacked by one of my cats here. Sorry. Hello. And I grew up in the age of Jerry Anderson. So of course on the TV, we're watching the normal Sunday matinees that you do. But I grew up with Jerry and with Supercar when it came out, Fireball XL5. It went on to Thunderbirds, Captain Scarlet, things like this. Again, it's all way out there. And of course, at that time, from the States, we had things like Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, Land of the Giants, the Time Tunnel, things like that.
Hmm.
Oh, and I was absolutely riveted. Yeah, we watched the westerns, of course, because that was on a Sunday matinee, and all the greats with Audie Murphy and things like this, and so on. But the anything that involved science fiction to me at that time, it was wonderful. And, I always became lost in it, and so it triggers an imagination. It helps you want to learn more about it. What if, what that? Then Star Trek came out, of course, in the early 1960s, and yeah, it was superb. So that triggered, my imagination. So it got me not onto just reading things. Like I say, by the time I was in what we call secondary school, um, I'd emptied the library of all the science fiction, Ray Bradbury, Arthur C. Clarke, Asimov, and I can't think of the names at the moment, but I just Jerry Pournelle, I just emptied them. I read them from cover to cover, and what else is there now? So,
Right.
and of course, doing that, it makes you, you start making up stories yourself, and you know, you just go from there.
Right.
Mm,
Good deal.
mm,
Okay. So you've got all this experience thinking about this and writing about
mm,
this and reading about this. That's my way of leading into this question.
mhm,
While we're on the subject in a way, and
mhm.
barely a way, but we're on the subject, I want to go ahead and ask the one question that I ask everybody that comes on this show. Um, when it comes to keeping a reader on the edge of their
Mhm.
seat or reading with the blanket pulled up to their chin, what do you think is more bothersome for the reader? Is it the coming of the known or the coming of the unknown?
Oh, it's definitely the unknown. I know, some people say they fear the known, but the more vivid your imagination, then the greater the fear of the unknown will be, because you will be conjuring up all sorts of scenarios in your head of, oh, what's going to happen? What's in there? Don't go, why are you looking at? Don't open that door. You just start to, because your mind's starting to run away with itself, conjuring up all sorts of, they're going to die. Oh, they're going to get torn apart. They're going to get eaten. They're going to get, zapped by a ray gun. Yeah. So it's the fear of the unknown, because, and I think it's it's natural, because if you can connect with it, that's what I was talking about, that connection. And if you can immerse yourself in it, then it's like your fears start to come. Oh, no, 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 don't do it. And you know, it's one of the definite fear of the unknown. I think that will scare the majority of people. Mm.
Is I guess it's, you hear the click, click, click of
Mm.
claws
Yeah.
running across a floor in the dark,
Mm.
and it's a mouse.
Hmm.
But the more you listen to it, the bigger it gets,
Uh,
until all of a sudden, you
yeah.
know, there is something from another world coming out of that dark. You
Uh,
know,
It, it, yeah, it's like that. I'm slightly different. My life has been. I've had a very colourful life. Between the ages of 3 and 11, I grew up in a genuine, real life haunted house. Some people who know me know that. And if you cutting a very long story down, if you think the film, The Sixth Sense, mixed with elements of Poltergeist, been there, done that. So yeah, seriously, seriously. Or you would be amazed at some of the things I've actually experienced, and because of that, that's why I've never really, until recently, gone into horror, because a lot of things like that don't scare me. They just don't. But I can appreciate why certain people really. So that's the type of thing I feed on when I'm writing. But yeah, for me, that type of thing just isn't scary. They've never really. For me to enjoy horror, there's got to be other elements of entertainment to it. It's got to be cleverly written. Like I recently saw, it's been out for years, 2007. We just had Halloween, yeah, and it's a little film from 2007, Trick or Treat. It's Trick or Treat, the one with the little burlap dressed kid on the front with the pumpkin head. But
right?
it's an anthology, isn't it? And there's four short stories in one, overlapping each other, and that was so clever. I saw people going on about it. Well, what is this? And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I wasn't frightened by it, but I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I saw where they're going, how cleverly it was done. So that aspect I do enjoy. And from that, I'm taking it in, and right, I'll try and you know put this into, now I'm writing horror or dark fantasy. I'll have a go. It seems to work.
Well, whatever works, that's great.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I think that in one way or another, all writers of fiction start out by asking themselves the what if question,
Mm.
um, and then figure out how to answer it as they write the book.
Mhm.
When you've asked yourself that question at the start of something new, do you keep yourself in suspense as to the answer, or do you already know it before you finish or before you start the book?
Yeah. Just thinking back over the books I've written, and especially the longer ones, I have it. I do tend to know how it's going to end, or roughly. Now, I will admit that while I want to follow a certain story arc to reach that final destination, it has changed. The route I've taken has changed along the way. And in one of my biggest selling books, that ending was indeed changed. It was as it just developed a nature, an identity of its own, and it's tended to steer itself towards that. And so, no, that will be better than I originally imagined. So I went with it. So I do tend to plan. Um, I do, tend to have a beginning and an end, but I'm flexible enough to realize that as a story starts and you get these ideas and they come streaming in, and you go with certain aspects. Oh, and in that case, it worked superbly, and boom, off we went. And it was an ending I hadn't anticipated at the beginning. But
Right.
usually, I do tend to plan. Mm.
Okay. Um, what's the most important thing that you know now as a writer that you didn't know when you wrote your first book?
Just how hard it is, how dedicated, how regular you've got to be. Now, I've never suffered from writer's block. However, circumstances can make it difficult. You remember, I'm married, and I can't just sit down for hours and hours a day. Although it might seem like it to my wife, you've got to divide your time wisely, and in that time, you've got to do a bit. Even if you can't get a lot of writing done, like yesterday, after we were recovering from the storms, we were doing this, that, and the other. So I was doing notes, sort of plans, and idea to wait. I've recently done my first creature feature for Raven Tale, and I'm on to the second book. And I thought of some ideas that, oh yes, this will make the story more interesting. I'll go, something that will really stir it up. So although I couldn't get any writing done yesterday, I was making notes, preparing those characters, giving them a history, because it's important to give them that history, so that they sound real, they appear as real on the pages, and so you get something done, make it regular, and I appreciate that more now than ever before, because I slipped into writing quite by chance. Do you want me to explain it, or not?
Sure.
So yeah. I had a very busy life. Although I had all these ideas, I had a very, very busy life. A decade in the military, then a couple of decades and more as a police officer. So the type of work I was doing, always busy, 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 busy. In the military, away a lot, different parts of the world. Coming back for a brief time on the way, and even when I was back, training, 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 away. Uh, you know, uh, with the police, I served in a specialist role. My favorite one was in a crime and intelligence bureau, where you're dealing with all sorts of horrendous crimes, the nastiest crimes imaginable, and catching the bad guys, as it were. So you never had time for it. And then I was injured on duty at work, and that's why we ended up here in Greece. In fact, because I was in and out of hospital for a couple of years. They said I'd be disabled for life, never walk again. I fought my way back to health, but we came here because of the heat, the warmth, and it has allowed me, and now I go running again, gym. I can't do what I used to, of course, no way. And I'm in my 60s now as well. But my Zimmer frame has got sports wheels. It's fantastic. No, and I and when we got here, I was like, and my wife said, "Well, you're making up all these stories at the time." Because one of the side effects of that thing I mentioned earlier on about living in a haunted house is repetitive dreams, a lot. And in those dreams, when I go to bed at night, I'm just writing out stories in my head, or living them. And she said, "Well, why don't you put some of these stories down?" And that's how I got into writing. I said, "Okay, I will." And of course, I just sat down and started, like from my head, because I'd done it for so long in my head. And of course, when, when you can't do that, you've got to have some
No.
degree of plan. And of course, that's what I know now. And
Right.
that first attempt, that first draft of my first ever story, ooh, where's the bonfire?
Yeah,
But and if anything, I had to put so much work into correcting it afterwards, and then I started learning my craft properly while we were here, and the rest, it seemed to go quite well. It took off quite well.
I understand that
Yeah.
completely. Um, I I cowboyed for a living. I was,
Ah.
chaps and spurs and rode a horse, and
Yeah.
did a lot of hunting and fishing and outdoor stuff. And
Yeah.
uh,
It's a hard
I
life. It's a hard
yeah,
life. I've
it
met some
is.
cowboys when I went across to. I've been across to the States a few times, Texas, and it's a hard life. Sorry, go on.
It's
So,
it's
yeah,
it's not
yeah.
easy, but
Oh,
but in the scheme of all that, as it passed, I accumulated stories,
yeah.
you know, things that had happened that were interesting. And then one day the doctor says, "You've ignored a hernia for too long. We're going to fix it."
Mm,
So I knew I was going to have 3 weeks of downtime. And I said, "Yeah, I'm going to put all those stories in a book,
mm,
weave it around to where it's being told as first person narrative kind of thing, but it wasn't me."
yeah.
And I could see it so well in my head. And
Ah, yeah,
and to transfer it to paper, as
yeah,
far as east is from west, it did
yeah,
not work. And it took
yeah,
me, I'm like you, it took, I've got 9 books in the bottom of
yeah,
my desk that no one will ever see,
yeah,
because it took that long to learn how to write a book.
yeah, yeah,
So I understand completely what
yeah.
you just said.
Even when you follow that golden rule, you did what I did, and I try to incorporate that in my books. Is write what you know. You did it about cowboying, and and I, where I can have incorporate aspects of the military and things
Hmm.
I've done in my books. So you can see that when it comes out, when you write what you know. Whoa! But at the beginning, even if you don't plan it right, if you if you're
Oh
going
yeah.
blind, even when you're writing what you know, you can just dig a hole and
Oh,
you can't get out. It's yeah.
you can make a mess in a hurry.
Yeah, just throw some dirt in on top. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
Um, Even though series books are different from standalones, both types have to come to an eventual end.
yeah.
Um, with a series, you generally leave the back door open or a window cracked so you can get into the next one.
Um. Well,
You,
yes.
especially if it's a continuation of the story.
Well,
But
Oh, yeah. Go on. Mhm.
you know, um, but with either type of book,
Yeah.
how important is it to you to tie up all the ends at the end of a book, or do you leave that to the reader's conclusions?
I think that it's always best to, dependent upon your story, to create a satisfactory ending. So that might not mean tying all the loose ends up. Sometimes you do leave it open. And in fact, one of the series I mentioned earlier on is before I came to Raventail, that ended up being my most prolifically selling book, was written as a one-off book. Uh, um, but I'm an avid world builder. Before I even start writing now, I've learned from my early mistakes. You give your story a place in which to reside. You give it a history. You give it a timeline, how things came about, the people in it, the languages, their customs, blah, blah, blah. And I wrote such a huge amount of background information that you only dip into now and again, because it adds that reality to a thing. And when I ended it the way I wanted to, the publishers liked it so much. Oh, we want a trilogy out of this, but it's a one-off. No, 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 no. We want to. So fortunately, I had a lot. So this is now. How am I going to do this? Because the danger then is, of course, you've come to this satisfactory ending, and it was a satisfactory ending. I was really pleased with it. I thought, well, how can I tie things together now? If I'm going to write another book. Now, fortunately, I'd done it in such a way that there was a degree of fluidity to it, and in that instance, it came out very well. Whereas with the Cambion journals that I've written for Raven Tail, well, as you'll find, that there's a couple of books to come yet, but you'll find that although one chapter closes, another one opens as a hint of it in the ending. So it rounds off the story in a fully satisfied, in a complete way. That chapter of Augustus Thorne's life is closed, but might there be another one? We shall see. You know.
I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah.
You're familiar with my Gun Hand series.
Oh
When
yes,
I when I
Walsritter.
did
I absolutely love that series. I'm reading another one of the books actually, in, not next week, week after. You know, excellent series. I love it, mate.
when I wrote the first one,
Yeah,
zero idea that was going to be a series.
yeah,
I left it to the readers
yeah.
to draw their own conclusions at the end of the first book. I thought it ended well for me,
Mm,
and I was done. And next thing I knew, they said, "No, we got to keep going with this."
mm.
And I'm like, how do you
Yeah,
do that? And I had to really study on that a little bit to even
yeah,
figure out how to make a continuation. But
yeah.
um, I understand exactly what you said.
Yeah, because it's got to be credible, hasn't it? If you're going to carry on,
Yeah,
especially when
yeah,
you yourself have planned the story to end in that way, and it's got, huh? And because you don't, you know, then you just don't want to dig another hole for yourself. I'll just jump straight in. Yeah,
exactly,
yeah, yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Look, before we run out of time,
Okay. Yeah,
and I don't want to do that, but
uh,
we're going to eventually.
uh.
Uh, Tell everybody about your latest release and where they can find it and you and everything about Andy Weston.
Well, my latest release with the Cambion Journals was Web of the Succubus. It's book 4 of the Cambion Journals. It's book 4 of 6. It details the exploits of the protagonist we've chatted about, Augustus Thorne. He's a demon-human hybrid who hates what he is and the hunger that consumes him, as it were, and he's devoted his long and lonely life to hunting others of his kind. You can find it at Amazon and other ebook outlets, and also, of course, through Raventail, who have been very supportive of it. Absolutely, you know, love what they've done with it, and the covers are, you know, wonderful. Because like nowadays, with so many books out there, it's like looking at a brick wall, isn't it? But
Yeah,
if your brick stands out, excuse me, if you don't mind, I'll just show. I mean, well, where is he? There it is. I mean, look at that. Oh, there you go. I mean, a hybrid's tail. I don't know if you can see it properly.
let's
Uh,
see. There
Oh,
we
there you
go.
go. Yeah, sorry, because I got that
They are
that brown
wonderful
filter.
covers.
Yeah, they're wonderful covers, and the design team come up with that. So bam, you know, so you can find it there. And did you say where to find me? Or
Yeah,
oh yeah,
yeah.
you find me on at of course Facebook, Andrew Paul Weston, on Twitter with the cunningly devised reversal of my name, Weston Andrew. TikTok, again, my name with 666 after, because I write horror now. See, boo, scare you, and places like. And if you go to my blog, it's named after me, andrewpaulweston.blogspot.com. You'll see the links there to other pages, to other um, social media and so on. And you can just go from there, because that's where I put all my reviews of the books I've been enjoying and other work that I'm doing. And you know, because I believe, as you've seen, not just in, you know, telling people about yourself, but supporting other authors, because
Yeah,
it's a hard life being an author.
it is.
You have to develop a thick skin, you know,
I tell you
otherwise
what,
you cry yourself to sleep every night on your pillow.
oh yeah, yeah. The biggest rudest awakening I got when I wrote my first book was that
Yeah,
the minute I wrote the end,
yeah,
there wasn't a line of people out my door waiting to get it. You know, they
yeah,
just weren't there, and
yeah,
that was a huge awakening for me.
yeah, 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 yeah.
well,
It is.
well, folks, you've been listening to a great discussion with Andrew Weston, and it was such a treat for me. Andy, thanks for being on.
Oh, I loved it. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Folks, I hope you'll go out and grab every book you can find with his name on the spine. You will not be disappointed. I guarantee you. Uh, this has been another installment of And the Plot Thickens. Read a book, tell everyone that you read it. Reviews do matter. Look up And the Plot Thickens on the Facebook page to catch up on shows that you might have missed. Follow me on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, or look for my author page on Amazon to see the books that I've written. And AM, you keep on kicking and gouging, buddy. We're pulling with you all the way. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in, and y'all have a great week. Thank you.